Experience Live, how are you today? Great to see you. Welcome to week one of a two-part series we're doing called What Your Science Teacher Got Wrong. How many of you guys would say sometime in your life you have taken a biology class? Anybody taken like biology, some kind of science? Yeah, most of us have. If you've taken a biology class, maybe some of you in high school, college, fixing to take a biology class, maybe you are, you started one this week and you're already dying. You know, I don't know what your scenario is, but, or maybe you took one like decades ago. I'm not sure. But perhaps you took this class and were confused or disturbed by some of the things that you heard. Maybe your science teacher say, or maybe some things that you read in your science textbook. Dr. Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist. He's taught at Oxford. He's a science teacher, and here's something he has said. Maybe some of you have heard something similar to this before. He said this. He said, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance, catch that word, they give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So he's saying, in other words, when you study biology, if you see something complex and you think, man, maybe there was an intelligence behind it, or maybe there was a God behind it, whatever you do, resist it. Resist that thought. Whatever you do, don't believe it. And many don't. Many scientists don't. Listen to this. A recent study polled 149 eminent evolutionists and found that 78% were pure naturalists, meaning that there's no God, atheists, basically. And only two of the 149 were clearly theists, which is the traditional idea of God. The rest were agnostics, meaning don't think you can really know if God exists, or deists. God exists, but he's not involved in the world. So you may say, well, what drives that? I mean, that's kind of some crazy numbers. What drives that? A couple more quotes for you that I think will help. Dr. Richard Dawkins, again, he said this. Listen, this is huge. Darwin made being an atheist intellectually fulfilling. Dr. Will Provine, he teaches a biology course for incoming freshmen at Cornell University. In it, he contends that Darwin's theory of evolution removes all rational basis for believing in the existence of a benevolent God, much less the God of Christianity. For Provine, and I quote, "Evolution is the greatest engine of atheism ever invented." Interesting. Dr. E.O. Wilson, a biology professor at Harvard. When I was 15, he said, I entered the Southern Baptist Church with great fervor and interest in the fundamentalist religion. I left at age 17. Why? When I got to the University of Alabama and heard about evolutionary theory. So the implications, I think, are obvious. Embrace certain parts of Darwin's theory, and you begin to reject the God revealed in Scripture. We've got a special guest with us today. I'm really excited that he's here to talk with me about this subject. Tell you a little bit about him. He's a mathematician and philosopher. Dr. William A. Dembski is the research professor in philosophy at the Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth. He is senior fellow with the Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture in Seattle and senior research scientist with the Evolutionary Informatics Lab. Dr. Dembski, and this is quite impressive if you ask me, but I'll just tell you what he's done. Dr. Dembski earned a BA in psychology at the University of Illinois at Chicago, a master's in statistics, and a PhD in philosophy. He also received a PhD in mathematics from the University of Chicago in 1988 and a master's of divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary in 1996. He's done postdoctoral work in mathematics at MIT, in physics at the University of Chicago, and in computer science at Princeton University. So all I'm saying is he's passed a couple classes, all right? He's passed a couple of them. Dr. Dembski has taught at Northwestern University, the University of Notre Dame, and the University of Dallas. And Dr. Dembski has published articles in mathematics, engineering, philosophy, and theology journals, and is the author-editor of 20 books. As interest in intelligent design has grown in the wider culture, Dr. Dembski has assumed the role of public intellectual. In addition to lecturing around the world at colleges and universities, he is frequently interviewed on the radio and television. His work has been cited in numerous newspaper and magazine articles, including 3 front-page stories in the New York Times, as well as the August 15, 2005 Time magazine cover story on intelligent design. He has appeared on the BBC, NPR, PBS, C-SPAN 2, CNN, Fox News, ABC Nightline, and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. He was also featured recently in the movie that was released that some of y'all may have seen called Expelled with Ben Stein. You saw the bumper for it earlier. That was released in 2008. We've got him in the house this evening. Is that pretty cool? He's in the house. So I want you guys to help me give a warm Experience Life welcome to Dr. Dembski. I told him about the Experience Life dress code. I'm certain he probably would have done the suit and tie thing, which I think is what they do at the school he teaches at. But I said, hey, dude, T-shirt and jeans at Experience Life works just fine. He said he's most comfortable in it anyways. But I'm going to ask him a series of questions and have him help me talk through this issue, which I believe to be extremely important and to have some pretty big implications for those that take it to its logical conclusion today. But the first question I want to ask him is really the most important. It's the most important. He's a computer science guy. I'm a computer science guy. I'm sure Experience Life, thank you. I'm sure Experience Life is curious about this. So first question, Dr. Dembski, Mac or PC? Right? Yeah. Okay.
Hey, backslidden Mac user, so I'm, or reluctant PC. So I may be going back to Mac. I've thought about it, but I'm still in the PC world. Sorry to say.
Okay, let's poll real quick because this is important to deal with. All right, how many Mac users, Mac fans in the room, please? It should be most everybody, not quite. Okay, how many PC people? That's cool. That's cool. I told Dr. Dembski we still accept him. I mean, even though we're trying to convert everybody to Mac, and if you're a PC user, it's okay. We don't judge anybody except if you're a PC user. But anyway, so that's cool. Dr. Dembski, I told you on the phone the other day that Experience Life, we do a series each year called FAQ, and we're always trying to answer the questions that people are asking. And over the last couple of years since the church started, many people have asked me questions personally or submitted questions for FAQ about evolution, things that they're reading in their science textbooks, things that their science teacher has told them related to evolution, because to them it either hasn't made a lot of sense or they haven't been sure of how to reconcile that with what is taught in Scripture. I'm curious, are we unique? Or are you seeing this in other places too, people questioning evolution?
I mean, doubts about evolution are widespread. I mean, but you got to be clear what you mean by evolution. I mean, it's a weasel word. It gets used in a lot of different ways. I mean, most commonly, organisms have changed over time, or genes have changed over time, gene frequencies. But where evolution really gets controversial is the broad claim that all organisms trace their ancestry to a single cell, going way back.
Like macro.
So it's macroevolution. I mean, it's monad to man, basically single cell to human being. And then what drove that? And it's the view that, and this is what gets taught in all the biology textbooks, is that it's an unguided, purposeless process. It's natural selection acting on random variations. That's what did it. And so there's no need for God or any intelligence to be involved. God may have set it up, but if God set it up, he was a master of stealth. There are no fingerprints anywhere to be found. So as far as the science goes, there's nothing there that suggests an intelligence.
Interesting. Dr. Ernst Mayr, and I think we've got a picture of him. Dr. Ernst Mayr, he's leading evolutionary biologist in the 20th century. Dr. Dembski, he said this. He said, no educated person any longer questions the validity of the so-called theory of evolution, which we now know to be a simple fact. Many of our science teachers say the same thing. Textbooks say the same thing. Our series is called What Your Science Teacher Got Wrong. Is that what they got wrong, what he had just so dogmatically said?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, in the history of science, lots of things have counted as facts which are no longer considered facts. I mean, the sun going around the earth, that was a fact. I mean, that was the best science of the day. Ptolemy's theory, I mean, for thousands of years, that was what was considered fact. We no longer think of it as a fact. It's been disproven. So just to invoke facts or to say that evolution is now a fact, I mean, I think this is a lot of rhetorical posturing. The idea that what he wants to say is that this is now so well established that, hey, let's move on beyond it. Let's not tolerate any dissent about it. So I think that's what he's doing with this. And to say no educated person, I'm an educated person. My fellow workers at Discovery Institute are well educated in this matter. And the thing is, evolutionary theory, this is not rocket science. It's not like this is a difficult theory to understand in its broad outlines. It's not that you have to do all this prerequisite work, learn many years of mathematical or engineering knowledge before you can get to it. You can understand it quite readily.
Yeah, what would you say, though, to somebody who would say, but, I've seen in my textbook proofs, they say, of evolution. Like, for example, I'll give an example, Haeckel's Embryos. And they're saying in the textbook, that's a proof of evolution. Looks something like this. How do you respond to that?
Well, lots of evidences are trotted out, but when you look at them more carefully, often you find that the evidences are real problematic. I mean, you really picked the worst of the bunch with Haeckel's embryos, because those embryo drawings have been faked. I mean, it was known that they were faked. So Haeckel purposely drew these embryos. These are different organisms, pigs, humans, fish, whatever, and he drew them purposely to look similar because that was supposed to confirm evolution if they looked similar. And the thing is, though, given where microscopy, looking at things in microscopes, was at the time, because he was writing in the 1860s, 1870s, he didn't even get to the earliest stages of the embryos. If you look at the actual earliest embryonic stages, they're very, very different. Basically, the idea was that the embryos are supposed to start off the same, and then eventually they diverge, and the embryonic development is supposed to mirror what was going on in the evolutionary past. And that's also been totally discredited. The thing is, these pictures get recycled in a lot of the textbooks to this day, partly because they're free. There's no longer any copyright on it, because stuff that was done in the 19th century, it's no longer copyrighted. So that's part of it, but also it makes the point that they want to make, which is that embryos confirm evolutionary theory, but they don't. In fact, what you have in embryology is often you've got organisms that are very similar, and they're built in very different ways. You see, I mean, embryology, I mean, you developing in your mother's womb, that's how you were built. Organisms like us, multi-celled organisms, need to be built. And what you find is that you can get organisms that are the same, that are built in very different ways, and you can also get organisms that are very different, that then will be built in different ways. And what they want to say, though, is that they're built initially in the same way, and then they diverge, and that's supposed to support evolution, and it doesn't. I mean, it's all been misrepresented.
So he's wrong, obviously, in saying that evolution is a simple fact, and you're also saying that in the textbook, some of these proofs of evolution are really not proofs at all.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most egregious one because it's outright fraud. And this is not just that intelligent design people, critics of evolution have pointed to this. I mean, this has been noted. Stephen Jay Gould, best known evolutionist this side of the Atlantic until his death in 2002, he said that this was just a monstrosity. I mean,
and yet we still see them in our textbooks, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, textbooks are being cleared up a little bit because we've brought these criticisms. But it's interesting, the response, because this friend of mine, Jonathan Wells, has a book, Icons of Evolution, and you're going to be, I think, covering the video on this, where he discusses these. And rather than just say, hey, we were mistaken, we shouldn't have put these examples in there, a lot of the evolutionists have dug in their heels, and they say, well, it still makes the same point. It makes the right point. And maybe they're not entirely accurate, but they're roughly right, rather than just clean up their act. And they don't want to give any ground. I mean, it's like a zero concession policy, because to allow that intelligent design or critics have any case against evolution is going to, I think they see the whole thing, their whole house of cards is tumbling down.
Yeah, let's go back to the definition again, because like you said, it's kind of a slippery word, and I think a lot of people assume when their science teacher's talking about evolution, they're talking about microevolution, or Darwin's talking about microevolution, namely change over time, which is uncontroversial. Define again microevolution, macroevolution, and in your science class, is micro and macro both together what they're advocating?
Yeah. Microevolution is small-scale evolutionary changes, and we see this all the time. I mean, we see it when offspring are born of parents. I mean, your children don't look exactly the same as you. You don't look exactly the same as your parents. So there are small-scale changes that happen, and they can be more significant. I mean, insects developing insecticide resistance, bacteria developing antibiotic resistance. I mean, that's evolution. I mean, Darwin got that right as far as it goes. But what's happened with his followers is they've taken this valid insight and tried to extrapolate it, move it way beyond its valid reach. And so they've pushed it and said, not only can you get insecticide resistance in insects, but you can get insects in the first place from this evolutionary process. Well, that's the interesting claim, but it's also the claim which is totally unsupported. Now, some critics will say, well, wait a second, you're making this macro-micro distinction. That's really an invalid distinction. You're just doing that because you're crazy creationists and you're trying to draw this distinction. But that distinction itself was made initially by Theodosius Dembski, who was the founder of the modern neo-Darwinian synthesis. So this is a distinction made by their side. It's not something that we foisted on this debate.
And just to kind of localize it, in case you're going, well, I'm not sure if that's really happening. This is off of the website of a professor of biology at Texas Tech University. He said this. He said the central unifying principle of biology is the theory of evolution, which includes both micro and macro evolution, and which extends to all species. So, like you're saying, they're talking about both. What would you say, Dr. Dembski, are the implications of Darwinian evolution? Like, why is this conversation that we're even having today important?
Well, Francisco Ayala is one of the best-known evolutionists in the United States. He said that the great achievement of Darwin was to show how you could get the apparent design of life without the need for a creator or a designer. So basically, you can get the organization, get all the patterns, everything that you see in life without the need for a designer. And that's what Darwin's theory purports to do. It's not saying that God doesn't exist. It's saying that he need not exist, that there need not be a designer, that basically we can explain everything through a purposeless material, or a process that, for all we know, gives no evidence of purpose.
Right.
Now you might say, well, God was maybe working behind the scenes. You know, God is this master of stealth who never left his fingerprints anywhere. But if that's the case, there's nowhere where the science actually points us to intelligence. And the thing is, there are sciences which deal in drawing the distinction between intelligence and accident, showing whether something is the result of design and not. Archaeology, is that an arrowhead or is that just a random chunk of rock? You know, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Is that radio signal coming from outer space, is that the result of an alien intelligence, or is it just random radio noise? Mm-hmm. We draw these distinctions in a lot of areas, and what evolution is telling us is that that distinction really doesn't apply in biology. It's all accident, the result of accidental forces of history working themselves out. There's no place for design.
Which is not good science, obviously. Right.
Well, I mean, I would say it's not good science because it seems that there is indeed good evidence for intelligence. But
what about some of the ethical implications?
Well, I think the ethical implications are if there's no evident place for God. I mean, people, I think, then very quickly ask themselves, well, what am I here for? What's my purpose? You know, I think it leads to doubts about God. It's not, I mean, the thing is, there are people who call themselves theistic evolutionists, but that term can be misleading because you think, well, theistic and evolutionists, so they're believing that God guided the process of evolution, but that's precisely what isn't being affirmed. What theistic evolution is saying is that as far as the science is concerned, the evolution happens exactly as the atheists say. It's just that God set it up that way. So the theism ends up being a veneer, if you will. Yeah. The adjective is theism, the noun is evolution. So the strong emphasis is on evolution. And it's not that you're forced, if you hold to this theory, to be an atheist. Okay, I don't want to give the sense that you're logically compelled. There's no way you can't be a theist, because there are theists. But it's an uneasy marriage, and it's a marriage that a lot of people get out of. So take E.O. Wilson. I mean, he was a nice Southern Baptist boy until age 15 or so. But once he got evolution, his religion was gone. Yeah. And that's not an isolated case. I mean, it's very widespread.
Sure. One book I'm going to recommend to you, it's in the Resource Center, but I'm sure we'll probably already sold out of them, I don't know. But it's called Understanding Intelligent Design by Dr. Dembski and a guy named Sean McDowell. You can also get it on Amazon, but it talks more about some of what we're talking about. But in this book, Dr. Dembski, you said that the evidence for Darwinian evolution is weak. What do you mean by that? How is it weak?
Well, I think the two key places where Darwinian evolutionists try to support their theories from the fossil record and then from molecular biology. And I think in both those cases, the evidence is not supporting it. In fact, much more supports an intelligent design point of view. Fossil record, the transitional forms are just not there. Okay, I mean, especially, the biggest challenge, and one that you often don't see even covered in the textbook, is what's called the Cambrian Explosion. The Cambrian is a period in the geological record at which all the basic animal body plans come on the scene at once. They appear there suddenly, so you think of something like starfish. and worms and humans, where we've got the bones on the inside, hard stuff on the inside, soft stuff on the outside. Then you've got things like insects or lobsters, which have the hard stuff on the outside, soft stuff on the inside. These are very different types of body plans. And these are the broad classification here is they're called phyla, and you have about 40 phyla that appear suddenly in the fossil record with no evident precursors. Now the thing is, if evolution is right, all of these should have been connected. If you've seen like Terminator T2, right, where you see this one guy melding into another. Well, that's what's supposed to have happened in evolution. Now, over time, different organisms, they split apart and they melded one thing into another. And there's no evidence of that melding. Instead, you just suddenly, boom, there they are. They're planted. And the thing is, the fossil record is actually pretty good, it seems, at picking up on things there. It's not like it's just, it just didn't get picked up on the fossil record because the fossil record is so imperfect. It just doesn't pick up a lot of stuff. The fossil record is like a vacuum cleaner that does pick up a lot of the main things. And one way you can see that is you ask yourself, extant organisms that are alive today, what proportions are picked up in the fossil record? And you find that when you go to higher levels of classification, like families, orders, which are way below the phyla level in the Cambrian Explosion, you've got fossilization rates of 80, 90%. So if you've got fossilization rates which are very high for things that we know, that we see, and they're in there, why are they totally missing at the Cambrian Explosion? And so that's, I think, one key line of evidence that should raise questions. And then I think even stronger, and this is where a lot of the focuses of my colleagues in the intelligent design movement is molecular biology. There's been a revolution in molecular biology in the last 40, 50 years. We know what's going on inside the cell, and when you look inside it, if you've got get on YouTube sometimes, look at a video called The Inner Life of the Cell. It's a 3-minute video, and it shows you what's going on inside the cell. And what you have is you've got information storage, retrieval, processing. I mean, you like your laptop computer, you got computing power, every bit as nifty going on there. Communication systems, transportation. You've got monorails, and then you've got little motors that move different parcels along and around the cell, targeting them for various places in the cell. You've got tags, zip codes, or UPS labels that say, okay, move this parcel there. Basically, it's an automated city. Every cell is an automated city where everything is tightly choreographed. In Darwin's day, the cell was just a little blob of jello enclosed by a membrane. Basically, he saw these few blobs floating around, and for him, the origin of this first cell was simple. He didn't write on the origin of the first life. He wrote on the origin of species because he thought life's origin was itself a very simple problem. And now everybody will admit that life's origin is completely unresolved in materialistic terms. So they're just huge problems facing it. If you don't have the origin of life, if you don't have a materialistic origin of life, how can you have a materialistic theory of life's subsequent history? I mean, you've got, the theory is wide open at one end.
So what if somebody says, well, but isn't Darwinian evolution, that view, the scientific consensus? And if so, why should we question it even if we're seeing problems with it? If somebody asked you that, how would you respond?
Well, I would respond by saying that science proceeds by breaking with consensus. I mean, the consensus often is wrong. I mean, sometimes consensus is right, but it can be wrong. And there's in the history of science, we find that, there's a classic book in the philosophy of science is called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. And in it, he recounts how scientific theories change. I think science is not a cumulative enterprise. Theories are put forward, they seem valid for a while, and then evidence comes against them. And what we have is we've got now massive evidence from molecular biology, which is suggesting that Darwin's theory is fatally flawed and that some alternative is needed.
And scientific consensus has been wrong in the past.
Yeah, it's been very wrong, massively wrong. I mean, it's not just in the details.
Yeah. One quote he has in his book that I just love, I think you'll find this fascinating, is from Michael Crichton, medical doctor and author. He said this, he said, whenever you hear the consensus of scientists agrees on something or other, reach for your wallet because you're being had. Science, on the contrary, requires only one investigator who happens to be right, which means he or she has results that are verifiable by reference to the real world. The greatest scientists in history, he says, are great precisely because they broke with the consensus, which is what Dr. Dembski is saying. So, Dr. Dembski, are there reputable scientists that agree with what you're saying? Is it just a few guys in some small room in Seattle, or are there quite a few scientists that are also questioning what you're talking about?
Well, I think there are people who are willing to come out of the closet. And in fact, this room in Seattle, you're talking about Discovery Institute, and they have a list of, I think it's approaching now 1,000 scientists who've put their names, signed their names, and said, we are skeptical of Darwinian evolutionary theory.
1,000 scientists.
It's close. It was 700 a few years ago, as I recall, and I think it's getting close to 1,000.
From reputable universities.
But it's like, yeah, I mean, with solid, impeccable background. I mean, you've got, for instance, Henry Schaefer at University of Georgia, Athens. He's got over 1,000 publications. He's been up for the Nobel Prize several times. I mean, so that, he's probably the foremost person there, the best known. But I mean, there are lots of very reputable people at Princeton, people at Rice University, elsewhere. But the thing is, that I think underrepresents the actual skepticism out there, because for every name that's on there, there are many names, people who are skeptical but who are not going to come out. Because, I mean, every one of these people gets targeted. Yeah. I mean, as soon as, and especially in this age of the internet, as soon as you are publicly associated with intelligent design, people are going to be writing about you, and that's going to tend to go up in the Google search engines. Yeah. So it's, it's not going to be your research, the stuff you spend most of your time on. It's just, hey, this guy is a flaming intelligent design proponent. Let's get him. And I kid you not. I mean, this is how it tends to work. So it's a hostile environment. And so a lot of people are not going to sign it just because they don't want to deal with the hassle.
Right. So tell us in your mind then, and this is where a lot of your research is, what's the better alternative? I mean, what's the alternative theory that you think has more support from the scientific data than Darwinian evolution?
Well, I think what we're proposing is a view or a scientific theory, which we're calling intelligent design. And the thing is, it's not saying that every aspect of evolution is wrong. As I said, small-scale evolutionary changes certainly happen, and design could be implemented even through a broader evolutionary process. I mean, but the point is the design that we see in biology, is it detectable? Can we know it when we see it? Is it there? Is it something that we can do science with? And what we find is that there are a lot of special sciences already that draw this distinction between, is it the result of intelligence, purpose, design, intention, or is it the result of accident, chance, randomness? So I gave the example of archaeology. Is that a random chunk of rock, or is that an arrowhead? Is that a naturally formed mound, or is that a burial mound? Search for extraterrestrial intelligence. This is not a program that has really proven itself scientifically. I don't think there's any good evidence for alien intelligences, but the question they're posing seems to be certainly scientifically valid. Are there intelligences out there in outer space, and have they communicated with us? And so you have radio astronomers that monitor radio signals from outer space, and they think that they can sift random radio noise from intelligent signals. Can they do that? And the presumption is that they can. They have various methods for doing that. And this is what I found in my own research over and over again. There are methods of design detection used in a lot of special sciences. And so I focused on what was common to them, and I came up with a statistical criterion for detecting design. And basically, you've got two things involved there. You have to have something that's complex or is improbable in the sense that it's hard to reproduce it by chance. Because if it's easy to reproduce something by chance, well, no problem. I mean, think of plagiarism, for instance. How do you know that somebody's plagiarized you? If it's only one word, the word "the," you can't say, you plagiarized me, But if it's one sentence, or if it's a whole paragraph, that's hard to reproduce by chance. It's going to be hard for an independent person to come up with the same paragraph that you wrote. And then you can say, hey, but it's not just the improbability. It's also that in the plagiarism example, there's a pattern that's being matched. The first person who wrote the paragraph, that sets the pattern for the second. Okay, and so it's not just improbability, it's also that there's a pattern match. When you have both those things happen, then you've got a design inference. And so I developed that in a book that I wrote in 1998 called The Design Inference. It was published with Cambridge University Press. And actually my job prospects and career prospects looked quite good at the time because, hey, method of design detection. What's the problem with that? Where I got in trouble is when I took that method and then said, hey, let's apply it to biology. What a concept, because we're doing it in archaeology, we're doing it in SETI, we're doing it in forensic science. What about biology? The reason it got me in trouble there is that unlike these other areas where the intelligence would be human or could be an evolved intelligence, it's the little green man who's sending us radio signals from outer space, presumably on materialistic principles, would have evolved in the same way we evolved, if indeed we evolved. If life itself is the result of design, then who or what is the intelligence behind it? And it would be an unevolved intelligence. Well, that quickly gets you in theological waters, and that's where the scientific community, my fellow scientists, philosophers, didn't want to go. And the thing is, there's nothing about the method which says when you apply it to biology, it has to be design. Methods are methods. They may apply, they may not. But it seems that when we do apply it, we actually find real design in biology, not just the mere appearance of design, as in the Dawkins quote.
Yeah, and let's talk about some examples maybe then. I know we've got a picture of Flagellum if you want to look at that, but let's talk about some examples of how you see intelligent design in biology.
Well, I think the poster child, and this is the flagellum, which you have behind me, of the design movement. It's become very popular. It's a little nano-engineered motor which is inside certain bacteria, so very small single-celled organisms, and it's basically a motility device. It moves the bacterium through its watery environment, and it spins in two directions. In one direction, it moves it forward. In the other direction, it causes it to tumble, and it basically does a random walk with drift trying to find a food source. So it's a way, and there's a whole signal transduction circuitry that's wired into it to tell it when to spin and how to spin. But this thing can spin it up to 100,000 RPM, and that's the fastest in experimental settings, but 10 to 20,000 happens in the wild. You look at this, do an examination of it. You have a long whip-like tail that serves as the propeller. You've got a hook joint. You've got a drive shaft, stators that stabilize the thing. It's got to be mounted on the cell membrane. You've got an acid-powered motor. You look at this, and this is a marvel of engineering. Howard Berg at Harvard, in his public lectures, not in his writings, but he's a molecular biologist there, has called this the most efficient machine in the universe. And the thing is, biology is chock full of these things, and they're completely unaccounted for in Darwinian terms. Franklin Harold, a cell biologist at Colorado State University, in his 2001 Oxford book, The Way of the Cell, says there are no detailed Darwinian accounts for any of these systems. Okay, so it's not just that we've isolated this one and there are all these other systems which have been adequately explained on Darwinian grounds. He says there are no detailed Darwinian accounts for any of these systems. Then he adds only a variety of wishful speculations. Now, when I brought this up at a conference of skeptics at Burbank, California, I was debating some evolutionists. Ken Miller, who's an evolutionary biologist, or cell biologist actually, at Brown University, said, yeah, well, Franklin Harold, he's an old guy. He's been retired for 15 years. He just left it there. It's like, that doesn't address the issue. Oxford University Press, it passed the editors. This guy knows what he's talking about. So you've got a theory that has just huge problems accounting for these systems. And on the other hand, we need to be engineers to understand these systems. If we weren't engineers, we wouldn't know what these systems are doing. So why is it such a big stretch to think that these systems are actually engineered? So I think that these sorts of arguments, especially at the level of the cell, the molecular biology of the cell, end up being very powerful evidences for intelligent design.
So if that's true, why would you say that the scientific community seems so opposed to intelligent design and to even considering this as a possibility?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things going on. I think one of the things is that intelligent design, unlike other scientific revolutions which have challenged a given theory, we're certainly challenging Darwinian theory, but we're also challenging the very way science is being done. And I think an important thing to keep in mind is that the nature of science is not determined by science. You can't go into a laboratory and say, okay, I'm going to do this scientific experiment, and it's going to tell me what science is. Science is the nature of science is not written in stone. It's itself been negotiated historically. I mean, there was Aristotelian science. Science has been around for a long time. It used to be called natural philosophy. The term science is less than 200 years old in the way it's being used. But there's a long history of science, and science has changed in the nature, the modes of explanations it's used. And so we're saying, hey, intelligence, information needs to be at the center of any science. And so we're changing the way science itself is done. That's happened in the history of science. So it's a much more fundamental challenge that we're posing than just even to a theory. We're challenging even the way science is being done. So I think that's a big one. And then there are then I think there are all sorts of worldview considerations. Materialism is very much entrenched in the academy. This is just the way the world is. And so to be bringing in intelligent design, well, intelligent design, that's just a stalking horse for God as far as they're concerned. So it's just you crazy creationists are trying to get God in there, which, I'm a Christian. I have motivations. I'd like to see intelligent design succeed, but it has to succeed first as a scientific theory. And the thing is, if you want motivations, there are lots of scientists who are motivated in trying to propose and promote atheism through their science. I mean, Steven Weinberg, a Nobel laureate physicist at University of Texas, not too far from here, he has said that the greatest contribution that science can make is to eradicating religion. So if you want motivations, I'm a Christian, I'm motivated, I'd like to see this succeed, but it still has to succeed on its own terms.
Talk a bit more, like you were saying, about materialism or naturalism. Define this worldview kind of debate in terms of, like you did earlier, origin, predicament, solution. Talk a little bit more about how those are competing with one another.
Yeah. Well, worldviews, everybody has a worldview, and there are a few basic components of a worldview. You got to have a creation story, an origin story. Where did everything come from? Then usually there's an admission that there's a problem when it comes to human life. We're not perfect. There's things we're dealing with. How'd the problems arise? What's the solution? How do we resolve our problem of living a good life? And then where are we going with all of this? Okay, now, worldviews are broader than that, but briefly, I think that those are elements that you have. Now, the Christian, we have an answer to that. God, by wisdom, created us and the world. The problems we deal with are ultimately the result of sin, rebellion against God, a holy God. The solution is to be found in the redemption through Jesus Christ at the cross. And then, the conclusion, where's it all going, is that we're to be united with God in eternity. Okay, so that's a glorious vision. It's a great way of looking at it.
I'd clap for that. I think that's a pretty cool story, personally.
It's cool. Yeah. Now,
let's talk about the alternative.
But there are alternatives. And the principal alternative that we're dealing with in this culture is a materialistic alternative, which says that in the beginning it was not God, but in the beginning were particles, energy fields, space-time, just basically material forces, material particles, and the backdrop to house them. And then, we are the result then of an accidental material process, an evolutionary process, no intelligence guiding it. What's our problem? Well, we're the result of an evolutionary process that's pretty messy, that has adapted us for a hunter-gatherer mode of existence. Now we're living in this high-tech world. Well, it's pretty stressful, compared to a hunter-gatherer that's gathering berries and maybe has to shoot an animal now and then. So we're in this high-stress environment. So that's our problem, that evolution has ill-conditioned us for the sort of world we inhabit. What's the fix? Well, take some meds, get some counseling. But it's a fix. That's the solution. It's not redemption. It's that we have to be fixed. We're material beings, and material beings need material fixes. So the image is much more of, taking your car to the mechanic. You got to get yourself to a mechanic and get fixed. And what's the conclusion? Well, all you are is a material being. So when your body dissolves, you've dissolved, and so you're worm food. So that's the vision. Now, it's interesting for the materialist, the Christian vision is pie in the sky. They think that we're just utterly deluded. And so they think at least bracing truth, bracing truth of this, this materialist worldview is better than the delusion of living, with in this never Christian land. And from our vantage, we've got the truth, and this is just an appalling, abysmal way to look at life.
So, Dr. Dembski, kind of as we conclude, sum all of this up, what we're saying about evolution, what we're saying about intelligent design, and then challenge us with what we should do with what we've heard.
Well, I think the key issue is, has God, has an intelligence by wisdom brought us here? And does this being, I mean, I'm coming at this as a Christian, so has the Christian God created us, and are we here for a purpose? And that then needs to be contrasted with the view that we are the result of a mindless material process that did not have us in mind. And that has huge consequences to how we live our lives, how we view the world.
Right.
So as Christians, we see ourselves as having meaning. Life is sacred. Humans have an essential dignity. From a materialistic perspective, we're just evolved animals. And there is no inherent dignity. If the society decides, if eugenics, if we got people that are, need to be aborted, whatever, it's okay, ultimately. Now they may try to minimize that because eugenics, Nazis have such a bad rap. But I mean that is one way you can develop this materialistic worldview. So it's the consequences are huge, and we're seeing it in the public policy sphere. And that's why, in a sense, this debate, you might say, well, it's just an abstract debate. It's so far removed from things. But it's absolutely basic to the other things we're dealing with in the culture.
So it can challenge us as to what we should do from here, hearing that, knowing that. What do we do to make a difference?
Well, I think, I think intelligent design is a key to transforming the culture. And I mean, I'm not saying it's the key, but it is a key. And I think it's certainly worth informing yourself. There's the book that Chris has there, Understanding Intelligent Design. It was written for high school students and also Sunday school classes. And it's a way of orienting people to the debate, and there are lots of resources then for pursuing it further. But you will not escape this. I mean, you've already been exposed to it in your high school, in your schooling. If you've got kids, they're going to be exposed to it. If you've got grandkids, they're going to be exposed to it. And the effects of Darwinian thinking are very destructive. Yeah. There are people who end up still keeping their faith, but it is in the minority. I mean, that poll you cited, only 2 out of 149 people were actually, in any sense, traditional theists. It's the numbers are just staggering when you look at biologists, National Academy of Scientists, the degree of atheism. There's just a huge disconnect between academic, the elite culture and the masses. Overwhelmingly, the masses, the unwashed masses, among whom I count myself, are theistic, believe in God. But the people who are controlling the academy, the monies, and are running the culture, unfortunately, are overwhelmingly influenced by this materialistic way of thinking.
I'm telling you, this is important to know. Let me conclude with this. He's saying you need to be informed. I'd pick up a copy of this book and then take a stand. Listen to this quote by Jonathan Wells, a friend of Dr. Dembski's, who's an embryologist. He said, "The outcome of this scientific revolution will be decided by young people." That's a lot of the people that go to Experience Life. Will be decided by young people who have the courage to question dogmatism, which you find a lot in the science classroom, and follow the evidence wherever it leads. Now, I'd like to ask Dr. Dembski a couple of other questions that I think do relate to this in the position that he's taken on this. But he is a great scientist, also a man of God, as you've heard, a Christian, a follower of Jesus. Is incredible. I want him to share with you how he became a follower of Jesus.
I became a Christian when I was about 18. I had taken a year off from college. I left high school early to go to college, and in leaving there, my life just kind of fell apart. And I believed that there was a God. I was raised nominally Roman Catholic, but even as a Catholic, I rejected that Jesus was God. And I remember explicitly rejecting that. And then for a while, I was just floundering there, and I was trying to get my life together. And I was thinking, where is God? What is God doing for me? And how can I connect to this God? And the problem for me was that I knew that God was perfect, and I knew that I was very imperfect. And how could God make a connection to me? And it was at one point that the light bulb went on for me that in Christ, God had made the connection, that God became human and knew our condition. Philosophers distinguish between knowledge by description and knowledge by acquaintance. I mean, that may sound kind of a fancy way of putting it, but knowledge by description is you may hear about a missionary or people suffering, off in China or someplace, but it's another thing to have been there with them and experience it. That's knowledge by acquaintance. You know it from the inside out, not just because somebody's told you about it. And God in Christ knows the full experience. What we're going through at the cross, he took on himself the fullness of human suffering. I think we sometimes get the wrong impression with the cross. Well, it was just 6 hours on the cross. No, it was the sin of all humanity. Everything was there. It was all dumped on the cross. And so when that realization hit me, then I knew that God really did understand what we were going through. And that's what was the turning point for me.
So what would you say to somebody here that might say they're an intellectual like yourself, but they're kind of on the fence about Christianity? What would you say to somebody that's just going, I'm just not totally sure?
Well, I think for me, and this may sound a little counterintuitive, I had to take a step of faith, even with what little faith I had. I remember thinking to myself, I want to believe this, but I can't. I want to believe it, but I can't. And then I remember reading, because I was reading Christian books, and there was one guy who was saying, well, you just got to start praising God, and I started thanking and praising God, even though I wasn't sure about this God. And it was within a day or two that things came into place for me. I read the Sermon on the Mount, and thought struck me, how long am I going to resist this? And then, so at that point, I got on my knees and asked Christ to forgive my sins and come into my life.
Would y'all help me thank Dr. Dembski for joining us today? If you're listening to this and you haven't experienced it and you're going, what in the world? I don't even know. You will. That's the whole reason we're doing this series, is because this is pervasive in our culture. Let me share a verse of Scripture with you, and then I'm going to pray and we'll be done. And kind of bring this together. In Colossians 1, verse 6, it says this. You can look it up later, but this is powerful, especially in light of what we've said. Paul said, and now, just as you accepted Christ Jesus as your Lord, you must continue to follow him. Let your roots grow down into him, and let your lives be built on him. Then your faith will grow strong in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness. Don't let anyone capture you with empty philosophies or high-sounding nonsense that come from human thinking and from the spiritual powers of this world rather than from Christ. This is like what Dr. Dembski was saying. For in Christ lives all the fullness of God in a human body, verse 10, so you also are complete through your union with Christ, who is head over every ruler and authority. Here's the last thing I want to say. Some of you are here today, and maybe you've been on the fence. You heard what he said about the commitment that he's made personally to Christ, and also about being on the fence himself and in starting to praise God and God drawing him to himself. And I would just say some of you here today may say, hey, that's me. I want to quit resisting. Like he said, he stopped resisting when he read the Sermon on the Mount. I want to quit resisting. I'm ready to surrender my life to the Lord Jesus Christ. I would challenge you to make that decision today if that's where God has you. And like Paul said, it's about accepting Christ as Lord. It's about repenting of your sin, turning away from your sin, and putting your faith in Christ alone for salvation. Praying and saying, Jesus, I'm a sinner. There's no way I could make it to heaven on my own. I recognize the standard is moral perfection, but I believe you died for me 2,000 years ago on a cross, bearing the wrath of God. Rose from the dead on the third day and offered to forgive me free of charge if I'll repent and put my trust in you. And so best I know how I do that. I put my faith in you. I commit my life to you. Some of you need to make that decision tonight. You may be an intellectual like him, but you're going, hey, this makes sense to me. God's revealing himself to me. Tonight's your night. Today's your day to make that decision to follow Christ. Let's pray together as we close. God, thank you so much for Scripture. Thank you so much for even science. You created this natural world. It points to you. The Bible says, and Dr. Dembski showing us how things like the bacterial flagellum or DNA, these things point to you, and so many people miss it. They just miss it. This is a big deal. It's not just some conversation being had in a science classroom. And so, God, I pray that these kinds of things, what we see in science, would continue to draw us to you, cause us to love you more and know you better. And God, I just thank you for the presentation that was made tonight. And I just pray that we would remember that regardless of what anybody tells us, a biology teacher or anybody else, nature clearly exhibits patterns that are best explained as the product of an intelligent designer. What's so cool for us, those of us that call ourselves followers of Christ, is that we know his name. We know the name of the intelligent designer. And God, we thank you. Jesus, we thank you for the relationship that we have with you. God, thank you for truth, too. Thank you for Dr. Dembski. I pray that you continue to use him in his work. In Jesus' name, amen. Was this helpful tonight? Was this cool for anybody? Pretty interesting? Dr. Dembski is going to be up here for a few minutes afterwards. If you have some questions, he'd love to visit with you. We're going to continue this next week. You need to be here. Bring some friends. We'll see you next time. Thanks for checking out one of our messages today. If you made a decision to commit your life to Christ, I'd love to know about it. You can email me at chris@experiencelifenow.com. Also, if you're interested in taking a next step, check out our website at experiencelifenow.com and click on Next Steps. Let us know if we can ever serve you in any way, and we look forward to seeing you soon.